In this video, we are going to learn about adjacent angles. In order to understand where do you see adjacent angles in daily life, let us take a couple of examples. So the first one shown in figure A is the example of a book that is open. This is the front part of the book, this is the back part of the book, and then there are a few pages opening in between. Now if you look at this closely, what happens is that this becomes one line of the angle, this becomes the other line, and then this becomes the third line, and we then have two angles being formed. These are the two angles that are being formed. So we have an angle A and angle B. Now if we look at the another example which is given here, this example is that of a car, right? In the car you have this driver's wheel, the driver's wheel. So this is what we have. Now let us assume that this is our center, and then we can draw straight lines coming out from the center like this and this. And what do we observe in this case now? We observe that these three line segments, they actually make angles with each other, and the angles are, like, let us say that this is an angle A, this is an angle B, and this is an angle C. Now you can see that angle A and B, they have this common side. Similarly, angle A and angle C, they have this as the common side, and angle B and angle C have this common side, and this is the common vertex for all the angles. Now this is an example of, again, angles which have same vertex and they are sharing one common side. And this is another example where we have drawn angles such that, let us say that this is angle A, let us say that this is an angle B. Okay, so we are just giving these names A and B. Now what we see is again the same type of observation. This is the common side and this is the common vertex for both the angles. That is, this is how the angle B is formed and this is how the angle A is formed, right? So in all these three cases, okay, we saw two distinct characteristics of the angles that have been formed. The first one is all of them have a common vertex, that is a common point in all the three cases. Secondly, they have a common arm. So in this case, this is the common arm, and then we also discussed in this case of the driver's wheel how two angles are sharing a common arm, and in the third case we have this as the common arm. And one more observation is that the non-common arms are on either sides of the common arm. That is, if you see, these are the non-common arms and they are on the either side. That is, one arm is on one side and the other arm is on the other side. They are not on the same side, the non-common arms. Similar is the case here for angle A and B. You can see that this arm and this arm are on the different sides of this arm. They are not on the same side. Same is the case with our figure A. So to summarize, adjacent angles are those angles that satisfy all the conditions below. Each and every condition must be satisfied. That of having a common vertex, a common arm, and non-common arms are on either side of the common arm. Now this is kind of a mathematical definition, right? These are the mathematical definitions. But intuitively, if you want to understand what are adjacent angles are simply angles placed side by side each other with one arm common. That is like very intuitive definition of a adjacent angle. Now let us look at a few examples involving adjacent angles. The question here is, are the angles marked 1 and 2 adjacent in the following figure? If they are not adjacent, say why, and we are supposed to give the reasons. Let us start with the figure 1. So this is our angle 1 and this is our angle 2. Now how do we know whether these angles are adjacent or not? We have to refer to the mathematical definition, the three conditions that we discussed earlier when we came up with the definition of an adjacent angle. So let's check the first condition. Do these angles 1 and 2 have a common arm? Yes, this is a common arm. Do they have a common vertex? Yes, they do have a common vertex. And the third condition is, do the non-common arms lie on either side of the common arm? So this is the non-common side and this is also non-common side, and they do lie on either side. One is lying towards this side, the other one is on this side. Therefore, angle 1 and 2, they are adjacent angles for figure 1. Let us look at figure 2. Again, we apply the same criteria. The criteria is, do we have a common arm? Yes, this is the common arm. Here we see a common vertex, and the two non-common arms, they are on either side of the common arm. So yes, figure number 2 is also an example of adjacent angles. That is, angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent to each other. Now figure 3 is an interesting one. So let us look whether the two angles have a common arm. Yes, they do have. Do they have a common vertex? Well, angle 2 vertex is this, but angle 1's vertex is here. Now since this condition is not defined, so straight away we can say that figure 3 is not an example of adjacent angles. And this is simply because the condition 2 is not satisfied. Please note that in this case also, the two non-common arms, they are on either side of this common arm. But because the vertex is not common for this angle, therefore the angles that are marked as 1 and 2, they are not adjacent in this figure. Okay, now let us try to dig a bit more deeper by trying to answer a few questions about adjacent angles. The first one is, can two adjacent angles be supplementary? That is, if I have two adjacent angles, can their sum be equal to 180 degrees? The straight answer to this is yes, and the reason why we can say so is that we can draw a straight line and we just draw 90 degree like this. So what happens? Now this is an example of adjacent angles. This is angle 1 and this is angle 2, and you can see that this is 90 degrees right angle and this is also 90 degrees, right? So these are two adjacent angles and they are supplementary, because when I add angle 1 and angle 2, it comes out to be 180 degree. Can two adjacent angles be complementary? It follows on the similar reasoning that we used for the first question. So let us make first 90 degrees, a 90 degree angle. Now what I need to do is just to find out a line segment somewhere here. So if we have this line segment, so you can see that there are two adjacent angles which we have formed here. Okay, this is angle 1 and this is angle 2. Again, it satisfies all the three criterion that we discussed for the adjacent angles, and they are complementary because when you add this angle plus this angle, the sum is equal to 90 degree. What we have done is we first drew a 90 degree and just cut one angle. It could be 30, 60 or 45, 45, anything that you can take, but it will be a complementary angle because we started with this, both of the angles. Can two obtuse angles be adjacent angles? Well, they can be if you remember the figure that we saw for the driver's wheel. So obtuse angle is any angle that is bigger than 90 degree. So let us say that we have this one arm and this is another angle which is greater than 90 degree. Similarly, now if I were to draw a perpendicular line from here like this is going to be 90 degree, right? But now I'm tilting this a bit more. As you can see the tilt, this will be roughly 90 degree. I'm just tilting it a bit more. It's greater than 90 degree. Now if you do see, these are still adjacent angles. This is a common vertex. Okay, this is a common arm, and if we measure this, let's say this is an angle 1 and this is an angle 2. So yes, these are two obtuse angles. Okay, and they are adjacent to each other. So yes, two obtuse angles can be adjacent to each other. So now let me just write yes to this, yes to the earlier one, and yes to the first question. Now let us look at the fourth one. Can an acute angle be adjacent to an obtuse angle? It can. In fact, we can just use the method that we tried here to figure out that this holds true. So let us draw a straight line first. This represents 180 degree, and then I just draw a acute angle from here. So you can straight away see that this angle 1 is less than 90 degree, and therefore it is an acute angle, and this angle 2 here is greater than 90 degree, and which is an obtuse, and they are both adjacent to each other. So essentially what do we see from here is that it is possible to have various combinations of adjacent angles. So that was our discussion on adjacent angles. See you in the next video.